And tonight on The Wrap, another revelation on the raid to take out Osama bin Laden. NBC News now says Pakistani intelligence knew where bin Laden was all along. Senate Democrats vetoing the president's trade agreement. Will tell you why and who the president's surprising supporters are. Plus, Carly Fiorina says she understands the economy, but does she? Also, Christianity is in a sharp decline, and not just with millennials. And have you seen that racist interview that's bringing Democrats and Republicans together? We've got all that, plus potluck and yay and nay. This is the Daily Wrap, live from New York City. And welcome to the show. I'm Joe Concha, joined by Sirius XM radio host, columnist for Forbes.com, my co-host, Rick Unger, who's back and looking healthy.
Thank you. Feeling much better.
To his right, Philly top lawyer and America's pundit, she is Heather Hansen. And to her right, he's the editor of thewisdomdaily.com. Brad Hirschfield is back. He really is.
He really is.
Okay.
There he is.
Lots happening. Let's get right to the daily download. So now more sources are backing up the claims by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Seymour Hershs, who says the Obama administration lied about the details of the raid to take out Osama bin Laden. NBC News now citing two intelligence sources who say someone from the Pakistani intelligence told the CIA where bin Laden was hiding a year before the raid. NBC sources also say Pakistani government officials were aware of bin Laden's location all along. Hershs says the Pakistani government has had an active role in approving and implementing the raid on bin Laden's hideout. Hershs was on MSNBC and defended his use of a single, unnamed source.
This is a very serious person in a very serious position who knows a great deal. And let me just go on, I was able to independently verify most of the items in it. Plus, I got two big major things from inside Pakistan, both from Karachi and both from Islamabad, the capital, that verify a lot of my writing. I just can't go around naming people.
Chris Hayes didn't look vexed in that or anything. Hershs says the original agreement between the Obama administration and the Pakistani government was to say bin Laden was killed by a drone in the Hindu Kush Mountains. But just after the raid, Hershs says the president decided to reveal the details of the mission carried out by SEAL Team 6.
The president went public with a speech that was prepared by the political people in the White House. Why did he go public? Because he's got an election coming the next year and he's not running so well. That's my reasonable assumption. That certainly was the assumption of the people in the operational committee. He was very angry that he broke the rules because suddenly you're confronted with a new scenario.
The Obama administration has been pushing back hard on the Hershs story. Officials still insisting that the Pakistani government had no involvement in the mission, was unaware of the attack in advance, and that bin Laden had been tracked down through his couriers, not through a reward. Rick, what do you make of these latest revelations?
Well, it's not a full endorsement of the Hershs story, but it's definitely one piece of it that now somebody else has stepped up and said it was true, this being NBC News. What I find kind of fascinating about it, if this is in fact true, if we did know where bin Laden was, and if we knew it because somebody came in for the reward money or however that went down, it would suggest that we didn't find it out by using courier, following the couriers. And if that's...
Which you questioned last night, by the way.
Well, I did, yeah. And if we didn't find it out that way, then I'd like an explanation as to why we were told that the courier information was the direct result of waterboarding and other things that I would term as torture that others might say aren't. But this is what we were told was how it happened. See, it really works, that waterboarding. It works because we got the information that gave us bin Laden. Well, now it appears maybe we didn't. So I hope people don't forget that.
Let's assume it's true, what Hershs is reporting, and now NBC is stepping forward. Now the dominoes will start to fall if it is true. Why would the USA wait 1 year to kill Osama bin Laden?
Well, if you assume what they're saying is true, there were clearly negotiations going on between the U.S. and Pakistan. But there's a lot of unanswered questions. Not only does the information come from waterboarding, but there's a Dr. Afridi who's currently in jail in Pakistan for allegedly helping us to capture Osama bin Laden. He's been sentenced to 33 years. Rand Paul has argued again and again to withhold aid to Pakistan until he's been released. If this is true, then he's a scapegoat who's serving time for no good reason. So there's a lot of unanswered questions
There
here.
is an answer to your question. A year's not actually that crazy because in the time it would take not only to negotiate, but to verify. a guy comes walking into your embassy in Pakistan and says, I know where bin Laden is, you're not just going to go, okay, great, we'll go start the mission.
But if you have the exact location, then can a drone just fly over a couple times?
probably-
Oh, the tall guy, because there's not a lot of tall guys in Pakistan.
You
There
probably
he
wouldn't
is.
want to do that without some verification, DNA verification.
Still a year
And
is
that
a
may
long
actually
time.
speak, Rick, to answer your question. You may get a walk-in asset who tells you. You may actually still need, whether we call it torture or intensified interrogation,
verify
a
it.
different kind to verify it.
could be.
It turns out the fight against terror is never a one-note deal, and probably you need all of these things. The interesting thing about this story, and I remain really skeptical, because when you do a conspiracy theory, everything always fits because it has to, because you're the author of it. Doesn't mean everything is wrong, but it turns out, I think what's really unnerving here is which is worse? That we need the ISI, Pakistan's highest level intelligence organization, to help us, or that they don't help us and they're supposed to be our ally. And I think that's the nub of this story,
Well, that
is
was
that
actually
one
my
way or
favorite part
another,
of the
we
story.
have a real problem here. They're supposed to be our allies, and we know the ISI was connected to the terror attack in Mumbai. We know that they've been passing weapons and technology and information to the Taliban forever. It is their position that using Islamic militants to manage their borders and to export conflict on the other side of their borders to keep stability inside their borders, that's been their stock in trade for years. And I think that's really the complicated issue is, the old adage in that region that the enemy of my enemy is my friend is not always true. Sometimes the enemy of my enemy is my enemy.
Brett, I'd be curious to hear why you're skeptical of somebody like Seymour Hershs, who has broken so many. Oh no, you're
Why
laughing, but
He's
somebody's.
actually a really serious
He
journalist.
has been a magnificent journalist. He surfaced the My Lai story and has amazing moments. He also peddled this story no less than 2 and probably 3 times to his editors at the New Yorker, and they didn't want it.
Right.
And David Remnick is a friend of his and a supporter of his for years. I think he's a giant in terms of journalism, but giants fall. And I think we have to be aware of this may be a moment of like Greek tragedy, where the hero, because of hubris, is overreaching,
but he certainly
makes a terrible
deserves the
mistake.
respect based on his record to take him seriously. You might be right. It may be the case.
That's how we're talking
you
about
had,
it.
you
It's
had,
worth
ma-
talking
you had
about
made
for
a
sure.
point, but it was so long ago. I forget what it was now. I was going to respond
About our
to it.
relationship with the ISI.
Save Rick.
Which
Well,
one?
The ISI.
Oh, the ISI. Yeah. To me,
See, I'm
the
paying attention.
most interesting thing in the story was the suggestion that we're actually much closer to the ISI and the Pakistanis than we tend to believe, and that they actually go to some trouble to create public tiffs for show.
Right.
Well, I mean, and this just shows how much we don't know. What goes on behind closed doors, what goes on with regard to the intelligence and all branches of government. And it's a little bit scary, and yet, we were talking about this before the show. Do you really want to know it all? And should we know it all? Do we have to know it all?
I want to get your thoughts also, since you weren't here last night, on the bin Laden burial, so to speak. No photos. There's supposed to be an imam present,
yeah.
correct? And was not. Why didn't we take I mean, you can do it pretty easily, right? Up there it goes into the water, and that's it. I mean, I know we don't want to anger the Islamic world, but give me some kind of evidence.
Well, I think like anything else, you start to document someone's funeral. To be clear, there doesn't have to be an imam present. There has to be special preparations of the body, washing and robing and things like that. And as far as I understand, there was Islamic clergy represented. I don't know what the story is, but there was supervision, and it was, we're told, done. It wasn't documented. Do I think that was smart? Probably not. Do I think it was well-intentioned? Probably, because I think they're not looking to make a spectacle of what they were trying to do with maximum integrity, even though it's a terrible enemy.
It's so hard to believe. It's so hard to believe that someone wouldn't take a picture. And then there's a Vanity Fair article that describes the photographs, but no one ever actually saw them. And then Eric Wemple's reporting that there was some misleading as to whether those photographs ever really happened. I mean, there's definitely a lot of things that would sort of raise the flag of a conspiracy theory.
It's a shame there isn't a grassy knoll on a ship.
Right, exactly.
Because it's kind of getting there at this point. You had mentioned that last night. This could be the JFK
Well,
of our
look,
generation.
it's interesting. It is, because again, I do keep coming back to Seymour Hersh, and yes, he may have jumped off the rails, but a guy with his history and his track record, I give a lot of credence to until I know. You're right about David Remnick. He's a great editor, and he did not want this story. But
I think there's a germ of truth.
all we know is the first thing that's come out backs him up.
We'll see. Legacy is at stake, that's for sure. Coming up next, Democrats are vetoing the president's trade agreement, and you'll never guess who's standing by his side. Plus, Carly Fiorina says she knows all about the economy. We discuss that. Stay right there. We'll be right back. And welcome back to the show. President Obama's own party is blocking his efforts to get approval on a new trade agreement. In a stinging defeat for the White House, all but one Democrat in the Senate voted against a measure that would allow debate on the Pacific Trade Pact. The move casts doubt on the president's attempt to complete a 12-nation Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, but the White House still putting on a brave face, calling the setback a legislative snafu.
The legislation that currently is that has been passed through the Senate Finance Committee is anything but simple and straightforward. I think anybody would acknowledge this is complicated, but the president believes that it doesn't give him the authority that's necessary to complete the deal and to enforce it, and that's why he has been strongly encouraging Democrats to support.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell pushed for approval of the vote and called the defeat shocking.
So there's every reason to knock down more unfair international trade barriers and bring more benefits back to Americans right here at home. According to one estimate, Kentucky alone could see thousands more jobs and millions more in economic investment if we enact smart agreements with countries in Europe and in the Pacific.
Now, the defeat is considered a victory for, guess who, Minority Leader Harry Reid, who insists other measures be included.
I don't support these trade provisions, but if the Senate is going to talk about trade, we must consider its impact on American workers and the middle class. And that's what the customs provision does. It's why I support combining these four bills to one piece of legislation so no American worker is left behind by the Senate Republicans.
Probably shouldn't joke about this, but he is actually intimidating with those glasses, don't you think?
The three blind mice thing is working for Harry.
A bit of a Capone thing going on.
He should have done that right from day one.
Probably, right, or maybe it's intentional. So the administration contends the trade pact is crucial to compete in the global economy and keep jobs here in the U.S. Are we in some sort of bizarro world where Republicans are agreeing with the president and Democrats are his biggest obstacle, Heather Hansen?
Oh, you sure are. I mean, you've got Elizabeth Warren begging to see the text of the agreement, sort of similar to other people begging to see the text of the Iran agreement. You've got Senate Democrat Sherrod Brown criticizing Obama for calling Elizabeth Warren Elizabeth and inferring that that's a sexist comment because he called her by her first name.
What imagine if you called her Lizzie?
This kind of infighting is definitely bizarro world. And to see Obama on the side of the Republicans, and I do think that the agreement is a good one. It's good for the economy. When 95% of consumers are outside of the U.S., why lock them out of the equation? But to see President Obama supporting it is definitely a surprise to me.
Rick, in terms of the president, does this mean he's lost some juice on the Hill?
He seems to have found some juice on the Hill. I mean, all of a sudden the Republicans are backing him. Look, this is the craziest thing ever. I have no idea if I'm for this or against this for a really simple reason. I'm not allowed to see it.
Right.
I don't know what's in it. You know what I do know is that if the legislation that failed today, which would have granted the authority to fast track this, if it had gone through, I would have had to have read this trade agreement, 4,000 pages in about 1 week. So God bless them for not passing this through. Look, what this really comes down to is the Democrats think this is going to be another NAFTA, and they blame NAFTA, either rightly or wrongly, because it's not all that clear. They blame NAFTA for the job exodus that took place in the 90s. So they're afraid this is going to happen.
And which president was behind NAFTA?
Bill Clinton. What was I say? Jimmy. I default. I want to blame everything on Jimmy Carter.
I'm with you.
But it is correct when the president says, and as you just said, 95% of our customers are outside the country. We're letting them make the rules. But you know what? I can't give you an opinion until somebody will let me read the damn agreement.
Look, I do find it funny that we're talking about what we can't read, because didn't we have the same conversation around the Affordable Care Act? So I think it turns out that
No, but we could read that. I read that all the way
But
through.
most people didn't, and we
That
know
was
most
your
people
fault.
voting on
It
it
was
didn't.
there.
So I think it's
Right.
funny.
You had
It
the
turns
option.
out it's a Rorschach test. If
You
you
had
want
the
it, you
option.
want it. If you don't, you don't.
Okay, let's get to our other topic. Carly Fiorina, the first Republican woman to announce her candidacy in the 2016 race, has touted her experience as CEO of Hewlett-Packard as making her uniquely qualified to handle the economy. But there's just one problem. She incurred sizable campaign debts from her 2010 Senate run in California that didn't go so well, and that she didn't pay off until recently. According to the Federal Election Commission, Fiorina owed nearly $500,000 to campaign staffers and consultants. Critics of Fiorina have also questioned her tenure at Hewlett-Packard. where 18,000 people were laid off. She defended that record on Meet the Press this weekend.
What people fail to comment on is the fact that we doubled the size of the company. We took the growth rate from 2% to 9%. We tripled the rate of innovation to 11 patents a day. We went from lagging behind in every product category to leading in every product category. And yes, in fact, we grew jobs here in the U.S. and all over the world. You can't just leave those facts out because they are as vital to the record as the fact that, yes, indeed, I had to make some tough calls during some tough times that many technology companies didn't survive at all.
Now, Heather, those are some pretty impressive stats that she just threw out, and you could very easily fact check them. They're all true.
Right.
So why does she have this monkey on her back that says, or 10,000-pound gorilla, that says she was a failure at HP?
Well, listen, we saw the same thing with Romney. I mean, when you have people who have lost jobs under your watch, and the economy being what it is, and the situation being what it is with people losing jobs now, it's going to be a problem for her. I've always thought she's not going to win the presidency here. You know, it's more that she's facing the questions as opposed to some of the others.
That's true. Rick?
I don't care about that. What I care about is what we haven't even mentioned, which is she stiffed her employees from her Senate race and her outside consultants and vendors. She didn't pay them. She's owed them money for 4 years. She finally paid them 2 months ago when she decided she was going to run for president. I guess she does understand the American economy, where if you don't feel like you want to write your own check, which she could afford, you simply stiff your employees and then you run for president.
Well, it certainly will be a problem because this will come up again saying, what, you couldn't even pay your own employees and you've laid off 18,000 at HP? Could be a problem. Anyway, coming up next, Christianity in sharp decline. We talk about it. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back to The Wrap. We want to continue our conversation about Carly Fiorina because I know that Brad wanted to share his thoughts on the fact that when she finished up her campaign in 2010, Senate run in California, lost by 10 points. Now, before that, she got a big severance from HP, so she was pretty well off.
That, yeah.
And I think the problem that some people will have when this story gets discussed a little bit more is the fact that she didn't pay her own employees, but she paid whom?
Well, she paid herself. The truth is she gave about $5.1 million to the campaign and lent about $1.5 million to the campaign. She got back her $1.5 before she paid off the $500,000 to the people who worked for her. Months and months before. And again, I have no problem, and I know $500,000 is nothing in a political campaign, but if it's your salary, you don't pay yourself back as a boss and leave your employees hanging. I have nothing against Carly Fiorina. I don't think she's a serious candidate, but there is something fundamentally wrong when you pay yourself back threefold and have people work for you hanging there.
I mean,
not right.
The irony of her saying that she is the one candidate, that's what she says, she's the only candidate running for president who understands the economy. This is her understanding of the economy, and boy, does that speak volumes for what she's all about, and it's troublesome.
I think we're all in agreement that she has very little or no chance to win.
Yeah. Right.
But does this hurt her vice presidential?
Well, I was just going to say, she may not win, but she's running for vice president.
Right.
And if she is, it'll come back to haunt her. That 1.5 to you, 500 not going to your employees. If she's the vice presidential candidate, we're going to hear that stat over and over and over again, I think.
Let's talk about some other stats right now, more in your ballpark, Mr. Hirschfield. That's Christianity remains on the decline in America. A new poll from Pew says that just under 71% of Americans identify themselves as Christian. That's nearly an 8-point drop from 7 years ago. Meanwhile, almost 1 in 4 considered themselves atheist or agnostic, a nearly 7% rise. Have fun pushing that boulder for eternity. When you break it down, hey, I'm playing it safe, man. When you break it down by the two biggest Christian faiths, Protestants showed the most decline, with a drop of almost 5%. The number of people who identify themselves as Catholic is down nearly 3. President Obama, who says he's a Christian, has taken heat from critics who says he bends over backward for other religions, especially Islam. A few months ago at the National Prayer Breakfast, he sparked outrage when he compared the atrocities committed by ISIS to those by Christians centuries ago.
And lest we get on our high horse and think this is unique to some other place, remember that during the Crusades and the Inquisition, people committed terrible deeds in the name of Christ. In our home country, slavery and Jim Crow all too often was justified in the name of Christ.
So, Brad, is this a max mass exodus, or are we just misreading these numbers?
We have to be very careful. This is like a moment, not just the 1920s, and religion is actually transportation. Buggy makers were under a lot of pressure, but the transportation business was about to explode. The decline is not a mass decline in Christianity. It's in one segment, really two segments of the Christian world, mainline Protestantism and Catholicism. The evangelical community is strong and possibly even growing. Pew doesn't say that. Other sites I could bring you show that's growing. So what's really going on here is people are not walking away from faith. They're walking away from certain inherited ways of doing religion. Religion and faith are not the same. Atheism is not going up. Unaffiliation is going up. What that means is people still believe, but they don't necessarily believe in the practices and in the dogmas they were taught in Sunday school or Friday school or Saturday school. So for me, this makes it a remarkably interesting moment for faith in America, because the interest in faith has gone nowhere. If anything, it's increasing. What's under pressure are the old providers of faith.
But don't you think there's also a cultural cost in saying that you're a Christian these days? With everything that's going on with regards to what's gone on in the Catholic Church. No, not Obama. I'm not talking about Obama, but with gay marriage and all the Christians who are against gay marriage and the backlash that we've seen against those people. I think that there are some people who may have been Christians nominally, by name only, who are now no longer saying that because they don't want to deal with the repercussions of it.
So I think there's probably a little bit of that, although the people most vociferously opposed to gay marriage are evangelical Christians, and they're not showing erosion. The erosion is actually in the mainline Protestant community, which embraces it. No, I think what's going on is people are trying to figure out new ways of embracing the search for spirituality and meaning, even as they push away the old systems that provided it to them.
My spiritual advisor, Michelle Bachmann, has
Still, huh?
Yes, absolutely. She can leave Congress, but she cannot leave my heart. She has let me know that Barack Obama is ushering in the end days. Now, if that's not being anti-Christian, or maybe it's being pro-Christian.
That would be very pro.
I'll take it back.
Because she figures she's going to win.
Obama is the best thing that ever happened.
Right.
I just can't believe that since this stuff came out today that I haven't heard more people saying, well, Obama is war against Christianity.
There are people I think know
So
it's an overplayed
hand
at best and a complete falsity at worst, and it's silly.
And
the real issue, if you believe in tradition, figure out how to use it in new and creative ways. Otherwise, people will be bereft of what they need.
To be quickly serious, I looked at the data. It's really young people, it appears, that are pulling back the most. And you're right about what you said. They still have faith. They just aren't identifying.
And that'll be the last word on that for now. Coming up next, a racist interview that recently resurfaced is bringing Democrats and Republicans together. We'll show you. Stay right there. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap. Well, journalists and pundits from both sides of the aisle are finally in agreement. But it's not over a policy matter. Oh no. Instead, it's over a train wreck of an interview which aired last month with Bloomberg's Mark Halperin, usually a pretty good journalist, and Texas Senator and 2016 hopeful Ted Cruz. The interview had shockingly gone unnoticed by the media until recently. Let's see what all the commotion is about.
Our guest tonight is a Texas senator and a Republican presidential candidate. It's Ted Cruz. Joining us now from Capitol Hill, your colleague Bernie Sanders of Vermont, another senator, announced he was going to also run for president from the other party. What's your appraisal of his candidacy, and can we hear your very good and very respectful imitation of Senator Sanders?
Well, I think I'll avoid the business of trying to do imitations of my colleagues.
Okay, not off to the best start, but I'm sure it'll get better when Halperin starts asking questions of the senator on more serious issues.
But let me ask you, it seems to me your last name is Cruz and you're from Texas. Just based on that, should you have appeal to Hispanic voters? Senator, people are really interested in you and your identity. So I just want to ask you as a historical matter, when you filled out your application to Princeton, to Harvard Law School, did you list yourself as an Hispanic?
Oh, sure. I've listed myself as Cuban American. That's my heritage and my background.
I want to close with, we'll talk a little bit more about your Cuban heritage and ask you in the following categories whether you have an affinity for or connection to anything part of your Cuban past. You got a favorite Cuban food, Cuban dish? You like Cuban music? Do you have a favorite Cuban singer?
Well, it can't really get much worse than that. Can it?
Finally, I wanted to give you the opportunity to directly welcome your colleague, Senator Sanders, to the race, and I'd like you to do it, if you would, en español.
I'm going to stick to English, but I appreciate the invitation, senor.
Well, I was wrong. It did get worse. To the senator's credit, he actually handled the questions with poise. Halpern later issued an apology saying, "My intent was to give the senator a chance to speak further about his heritage and personal connections to the community through some casual questions. I rushed through the questions, you did, and that was a mistake. It led to poor tone and timing. As for asking Senator Cruz to welcome Senator Sanders to the race in Spanish, that was meant to be a type of lighthearted banter that he's done with us before on the show. In no way was I asking Senator Cruz to prove he was an authentic Latino. I apologize to those that were offended, ding, and to Senator Cruz. I promise that I will work to make the tone and questions better next time." Halpern has been lambasted in the media from both sides, pretty much calling him and the interview racist. Can Halpern recover from this, Heather Hansen?
Yeah, I think he can recover from it. It was absolutely ridiculous behavior. It makes me wonder, I have seen him on shows as a pundit. I've never seen him doing the interviews. And it just makes me wonder if it's a situation where he just doesn't know how to interview someone. Because if you were to ask similar questions of a woman, like where do you shop and all kinds of stereotypical questions, it would be equally offensive. I don't know how he thought he was going to get away with that.
This shows, Rick, how difficult it is to be not only a guest and a pundit, but to host a show as well, and to have that versatility and flexibility.
It's just so hard.
It's impossible.
What we do is brutal. I mean, it's way easier than heavy lifting.
Do you think that what was Halpern's real motivation? You said he was trying to joke around, but clearly he was trying to make it look foolish.
He was trying to do exactly what he said he wasn't trying to do. He was trying to show or find out the authenticity of his Latino heritage. It was awful, but you know what? There's no recovering from him, because anybody who knows this guy knows that this is who he is. I mean, this is the guy who was thrown off of Morning Joe for, I don't remember how long the suspension was, a month, 2 months, for calling the President of the United States an incredibly offensive word.
I could do this without being offensive.
Yeah?
It's the nickname for Richard.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's right.
No, Mark Halpern, I'm not the least bit surprised. In fact, when I heard the story was happening, no kidding, I heard that somebody had done this, I went, it had to be Mark Halpern.
But his background is what? I mean, he wrote The Game Changer. He's not. Doesn't have
he's
a
a journalist. Oh no,
Yeah.
he's a serious journalist.
Apparently has a proclivity for racist questioning.
He's now the political editor at Bloomberg.
Right, and right. I just don't know that he has the experience to do what he was doing and do it better.
He has no personality.
You know what the best part about this whole story is? I think everybody is missing the fact that this interview was done on April 30th. And it's only coming out
I
now.
thought it was like yesterday. I did not realize.
Are you a little bit perturbed if you're Michael Bloomberg? And that was on Bloomberg TV.
That's true.
And no one noticed it for 2 weeks until someone said, "Did you see that interview with Cruz?"
True.
It's
I don't know
really
if I'm
unbelievable. You got to be
perturbed or
worried if you're doing it, but actually, whenever it comes out, what's worse to me, I apologize to those who were offended. No.
No, everyone was
Here's the
offended.
deal. You have to apologize because what you did is offensive. Would you look at President Obama and say, "Mr. President, can you say that in jive?" It's like the old airplane movies. I mean, my God, for a 16-year-old to do it and think it's cute, I get. To actually be on Bloomberg and be a regular guest on MSNBC and do this stuff? No, that's not good.
Last one.
Ted Cruz handled it beautifully,
He did.
and
Yes, he
he
did.
then accepted the apology beautifully. You have to give him credit where credit's due.
I am not one to do that very
Right, I know.
often, but he did handle it very well. I agree.
Okay, well, we have to say adios to this segment. Coming up next, it's potluck time, and I hear Rick and Heather have cooked up something special this evening. Normally, it's our favorite stories of the day. They have combined to give you a casserole. Thank you, Heather. So we'll have more of that from New York. This is the Daily Wrap. Do not go anywhere. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap. It's potluck time. This is the part of the show where we shouldn't tell jokes during the commercial because then it's hard to transition out of. But it's also the part of the show where we go around the table and share our favorite stories of the day. Rick Unger and Heather Hansen, a rare collaborative effort between the two of
Yes,
you.
because we wanted to do something special for the Daily Wrap. Okay, so there's been a lot of talk lately in the news about the Supreme Court. Heather and I are both fans of, well, I don't know if we can say we're fans of the Supreme Court, but it's an institution of government that we both have an affinity for. And we decided that we would take a little time today first to discuss why there are some open questions. We all recall that last week, Dr. Ben Carson, who's running for president, said that we should be having a discussion as to whether or not the Supreme Court should have the power to review acts of Congress for their constitutionality. And I know I got a lot of tweets, whatever. I always have trouble with it. A lot of saying, well, you know, why does the Supreme Court get to do that? And what's fascinating about it is it never actually says in the Constitution that the judiciary has the power of review. That's interesting because if you read everything that surrounds it, and there's a great deal to read to see what the founders actually thought about this, they very much did believe in the concept of judicial review. It just makes sense. If Congress were to pass a law that is clearly unconstitutional, and the Constitution does say that it is the supreme law of the land, somebody's got to be able to say, wait a minute, that doesn't work. It's not going to be the president, is it? So that leaves the judiciary. But yet, when Ben Carson says it's not clear, in a sense, he's right in the fact that it never explicitly said it in the Constitution, but it was implied. How do we know that it was implied without going into the weeds on certain cases? In fact, there were two key cases, the result of which was that the Supreme Court made it clear that they have the power to review acts of Congress, virtually anything else that's passed to determine if it is constitutional. So now you see why we have this immense power and why so many people seem to think that there's legislation from the bench. It's not that they're legislating, but they are there to decide whether or not something that is legislated does or does not violate the Constitution. Now, because of that immense power, we've all seen it in action in recent years. We've seen it in action since the beginning of our nation, but we've seen the Obamacare case where you may have been happy with the result, you may have hated the result, but you see where this judicial review has a massive impact on policy. And we're about to see that even more, and I'm going to let Heather take it from there.
Well, the reason we're about to see it a little bit more is because 3, if not 4, of our current Supreme Court justices are at the age of retirement. 3 of them are greater than 80, and 1 is 78. The average age of retirement is 78.7. So you've got a bench that is about to retire, and the next president will have the ability to choose who is going to replace those people. And so when you talk about, as Rick said, this enormous power to create policy, these new justices will be doing just that. So you look at the issues that are coming up with our Supreme Court in the coming years. The NSA and what is the extent of their ability to do surveillance on the American people, that is likely to hit the Supreme Court in the next few years. We see gay marriage right now. The religious freedom issues that have come up are probably going to follow. More Obamacare. And many of the decisions that have been made in the past few years with regard to voting rights, campaign finance, gay rights, religion, have been decided 5-4. So it is so inherently important who is going to be on the bench. And so we've talked on this table many, many times about how foreign policy and the economy are going to be the driving factors in the next election. I think, and especially on the Democratic side, there's going to be a push for these policy issues, especially abortion. That's another thing that we didn't even talk about. I mean, there's so many things that the Supreme Court will ultimately decide. And whoever puts these people in as justices will affect not just your children, not just your grandchildren, but even for as long as they stick around.
Let me insert a quick question while you're explaining this. A lot of people say to me, well, there's not supposed to be politics in the Supreme Court, and there isn't.
Right.
That's why they're appointed for life, no politics. But yet most people believe there is politics.
With regard to the appointments. I mean, the people
Well, and in terms of what they do on the court.
Yes. I mean,
what do you say to that?
I think that everyone is political. It's impossible not to be. I mean, that's why I think very strongly that we should be recorded, and we should be able to see what goes on in there, and that there should be a lot more transparency in the process. It's our government, they're our court, we should be able to see what they're doing.
Right.
I think there's one way to actually get some of the politics out. It is inherent, we're political beings, and that's surprise. Show me a justice whose decisions surprise people. The truth is, Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Kennedy both do this, and that's what makes them, I think, great jurists. Show me a justice whose decisions...
Roberts more so in
even more so,
history.
and that's the point. Show me justices who will write a surprising decision, and I'll show you a healthy court. Give me politicians who have the courage to nominate those kind of jurists, and I'll show you a strong court.
Many would say that Roberts' decision to make certain decisions was very much political.
And on that note, great job, by the way. I haven't seen a duet like that since, I don't know, Lita Ford and Ozzy Osbourne. Anyway, Yay or Nay is next. This is the Daily Wrap. Yes, happy time, people. Welcome back to the Daily Wrap, where it's time for Yay or Nay. First up, it's no surprise that New Jersey Governor Chris Christie loves to eat, even though not as much. He has lost about 75 pounds. But you may be surprised by just how much money the governor spent on snacks at NFL games over 2 seasons. According to New Jersey Watchdog, the governor spent $82,000 of taxpayer money on snacks at MetLife Stadium during the 2010 and 2011 seasons, averaging out to about $1,500 a visit. He's a Cowboy fan. Should New Jersey residents, like me, have to pay for Christie's snack habit? Yay or nay, Rick Unger?
Nay. I mean, what was he thinking? Let people get their own snacks if you're spending taxpayer money,
Right.
or spend your own damn money on it.
Let me inject something
We're not there with them having fun.
for a second. I've been to MetLife Stadium, the old Giant Stadium, and when you're in a luxury box, you can entertain 30, 35 people.
Right.
So
He's
it
not eating
sounds
snacks.
like a lot, but when you break it down, it's pretty much what the average
your
bill
own
is.
hot dog.
In other words, but the way the media portrayed this was that he ate $82,000 worth of snacks.
And that's a shame. And it's a shame, he wrote a great op-ed in today's Wall Street Journal about his plan for the economy. He has a lot of great ideas, and it's a shame that this type of stuff is all we talk about when we talk about him now. He
Right.
no longer is a runner, really.
I guess we're contradicting ourselves because we're talking about it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Bradley?
Oh, of course, it's ridiculous. Not that we're making an issue of this. First of all, who's been to a stadium lately? That's like 6 hot dogs and 12 beers. So let's be very clear. Second of all, there's a budget for this, state line budget. Much of it's reimbursed by the New Jersey GOP anyway. So this is much ado about nothing. This is faint. This is really.
Why would that be reimbursed by the Jersey GOP?
They say it is. I don't know. Talk to the people in the state. They say it is.
I see.
They're entertaining.
You
It's
can
like
always
entertaining.
make people are lying.
Right.
But
No, I'm
the truth
not,
is,
but they're
this is
saying
make
it
fun-
wasn't
And I
taxpayer.
take this personally because this is make fun of the fat guy. That's what the story is about. Now I get it, and there are reasons to be annoyed with Chris Christie. This ain't one of them.
Right. It's entertaining clients just like they do with business.
Exactly.
That's true. An Oregon science teacher arrested for allegedly using a Tesla coil to burn the phrase "I love mom" into his students' arms. We have some tape, I think, of this. Some students are stepping up in their teacher's defense, saying the students went up voluntarily, with some students competing to see how long they could stand the coil. No students were injured. The teacher has been charged with first-degree criminal mistreatment. More on that from Heather in a moment. If convicted, he could face up to 5 years in prison and has a $125,000 fine for each count. Is the science teacher guilty, Heather Hansen, yay or nay?
It certainly seems that way. I mean, this type of behavior in school, it's just unbelievable to me what these teachers are doing. We need better teachers.
He's experimenting. It's science class.
Oh, good. Human experimentation. First of all, I don't mean to be mean after I said about the governor. Did you see his face? I mean, it's not hard to believe. No, the reason you know it's a real abuse is the number of students who step up and say, he did nothing wrong. And that's how you know it's not just about hurting their bodies. It's an abuse of power.
Or they thought
and
it was
people
cool.
who are abused that way
Or they thought it
often
was
want
cool.
to defend their abuser. No, this was completely
It's
wrong.
our-
I'm sure at
our-
the time they thought it was cool because the teacher asked them.
I'm not defending them because it's bizarre, but you can make that same argument then for somebody who does tattooing.
No, I could make that same argument for someone who has a position of power and tells other people to get tattooed.
Well, either way.
That's
He
the
didn't
difference.
make them.
He doesn't have to make them. That's what it means to have power. You have influence comes to that power. That's why you're the teacher and they're the students. Sorry, that's what teaching's
Can
about.
I do a heart in your arm before we leave?
Well, you're a little different, but maybe.
Either way, this is just one more argument against common coil. I just thought that up, I swear to God.
Yeah, no.
A new record was set yesterday in the art world when one of Picasso's Cubist masterpieces, Women of Algiers version, is that O or 0? The prompter won't tell me, and I don't follow art, so clearly this is transparency at its finest from your anchor. Sold at Christie's for over $175 million. The lucky buyer is still unknown. Would you pay $179 million for a painting, Brad Hirschfield?
I would like to have the option.
Yeah, me
Well
too.
And if I'm honest, I think if I had the option, my answer would be very different.
Very good. Heather?
I feel the same way. I mean, it's a Picasso. It's not just a random.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
But the buyer will stay unknown, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yes. That
Okay.
was
No
by
doubt.
design.
Because relatives will say, hey, can I
Yeah.
get a little scratch over here? Anyway, that is our show for this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, panel, great job as always. We really appreciate it. Thank you for joining us. I'm Joe Concha, reminding you, it's now been 20 days since Hillary Clinton has taken a question from the media. Newsmax Prime with J.D. Hayworth next.